Welcome to the Grim Tutors, your one-stop shop for all things Magic the Gathering. I'm Colton, also known as Pez.
And I'm Oblivion. So, what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about anatomy.
Anatomy?
The card anatomy.
So, like all the stuff that's on a card and explain what it is, what it does, what it is?
Yeah, the name, mana cost, text box, flavor text.
Types?
What kind of card it is.
Sounds like we got a lot to go over.
At least 7.
At least 7. So, where should we start?
I would like to start at the very top left of a Magic the Gathering card, which will tell you what it is.
Ooh, so the name of the card.
Name of the card, yes. This will be, Mountain. Oh, I guess it would be over. This is my left. Mountain.
What? I put it on the right of the screen.
She puts it on the right of the screen.
Teysa, Orzhov Scion.
Snapcaster Mage. Opt. Lord Windgrace.
Opposition Agent.
What's a fun one? Skizzards Lizards.
Hissing Iguanar.
Hissing Iguanar.
So besides naming whatever the spell is, whether it's a creature or maybe an enchantment, what makes the name of the card so important?
Take, for instance, say, Thalia. She has Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, which is a 1 colorless, 1 white, 2/1 creature with first strike, and non-creature spells everyone casts costs an additional 1, and then there's Thalia Heretic Cathar, which is 3 mana, 2/3 creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. They're the same person in Magic lore, but they're 2 different cards.
So they do different things, as explained, right? But there's like a rule, right, that has to do with the names of cards. Because I know in some formats you can only play 1 of a certain named card. But there's other formats that you can play multiples, right?
Right. So take a format like Commander. Commander you can only play 1 ofs. So I can only have 1 Thalia, Guardian of Thraben in my entire deck. Whereas a format like Modern, I can have 4 of Thalia, Guardian of Thraben in my deck.
And it's the full name, not just the person or character that's on the card, right?
Right. So back in when the game first came out, they had a really bad problem of people just putting in like 15 lands and then the rest of their deck was all lightning bolts. Or like it was like 15 taigas and Curd Apes and lightning bolts, and that was the only thing in their deck because there wasn't a card limit. You could play as many of one card as you wanted back in the day. But then they realized that that was a bad idea and quickly changed that.
So just to recap on names of a card. Top left-hand corner of a Magic the Gathering card. In bold text. May have a similar character or a character that repeats itself within the lore, but it's specifically that name. That one thing. So even though Thalia comes up in a couple of different cards, it's specifically Thalia, Guardian of Thraben when they talk about the name of a card. I know that there are also cards that in the text box, which we'll go over, it states that you can have any number of cards like Rat Colony or Shadowborn Apostle. So there are some that in the text box tell you that you can have more than one regardless of what kind of format you're playing, as long as the card's legal. Now, I do have one question about names of a card.
Okie dokie.
All right, so let's take for instance this new Lord of the Rings set, which as we're recording this, it's pre-release weekend for this set. And there are quite a few cards that are being reprinted into this set that have a different name than what they normally are. They reprinted Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, which is the land, but it doesn't say at the top. They gave it like a Lord of the Ringsy name, and then there's like a little window right underneath it that says Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth.
Yes.
So when it says that it can only be 1 or 4 or whatever of the same named card, are they talking about, in those instances, the fun set name that it has, or what it is actually representing?
What it is representing. So the Lord of the Rings card may have a fun name, but in reality, it is Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth.
So, like those Lord of the Rings land reprints, those Post Malone cards, anything that has like that little window, maybe that's not the best, the little extra box underneath it. There's gonna be a picture on the screen, it's fine.
A picture.
But it's not that, in those instances, it's not the name in bold in the top left-hand corner. It is the name in the window that the card is representing.
Right. It's basically like a fun little reskin of a card. Like all the Fortnite cards. Like a Smuggler's Copter got turned into the Battle Bus. You cannot have 4 Battle Buses and 4 Smuggler's Copters because the Battle Bus is representing Smuggler's Copter.
Well, that makes sense, and that answered my question.
Wonderful.
So I think now we can move on to the other side of that area of the card.
The right side.
The right side. So over there, you're going to have the card's mana cost.
Yeah. The mana costs can just be all sorts of things. But you have to be sure, say for instance, you're casting Lord Windgrace. Lord Windgrace is 2 colorless, a black, red, and a green. So, from what we went over in the last video, you have to have 2 of any one color to represent the colorless, and then you have to have a black, red, and a green to be able to cast Lord Windgrace.
That makes sense. And we'll talk later when we get into like deck building and mana curve and all these other fancy things that I barely understand, that will bring the mana cost definitely center stage, so to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
But those, you want to know where the mana cost is? It's in the top right hand corner. Now, the mana that's used in the mana cost typically represents the color of the card.
Yeah. So, say you're casting a Kodama's Reach. It is 1 green and 2 colorless. This card is green. Just only green. Say you're casting a Izzet Charm. That card is red and blue, as defined by its casting cost.
We also talked about some cards like Rograk, son of Roga, I think is how you say it, that old Roger boy. We talked about how he has a color indicator to indicate the color of him. But what about the cards that say this card has no color?
Are you talking about the mechanic Devoid?
Yeah, do you think we should tell them about that now?
I don't see why not. Devoid was only in Oath of the Gatewatch, the second set for Battle for Zendikar. So take for instance Kozilek's Return. It is 1 red and 2 colorless, but because it says in the text box that it is devoid, which means it is devoid of color. So even though it costs a colored mana to cast it, the spell is colorless.
But that's only important for spells that say that they are devoid.
Right.
So why is that important?
So it's important for just some probably rare instances where you cast your Kozilek's Return. We'll just use that one again. And your opponent's got a blue elemental blast. It says counter target red spell or destroy target red permanent. You cannot do that because the spell is not red.
But if it didn't say devoid on it, then you could. So the color of a spell is determined by the color or colors indicated in the card's mana casting cost or by their color identifier. However, there are lots of cards that have other color pips in their text box that allow them to do different things. So do not be alarmed if you see Kenrith the Returned King and you see that his casting cost is white, but he has access to the entire Wooburg lineup in his text box. That just means that you couldn't red elemental blast him, which is good. Now, the next part of Magic cards, I think, is one of the things that makes Magic so special. It's that big box in the middle, and it's the illustration.
Oh, the picture. The art.
Yes.
Magic is definitely known for its beautiful art. I've known quite a few people that don't actually play Magic. They just collect it because they like the art. Kind of like what I did with Pokemon when I was a little kid.
There isn't too much to specifically say about the illustration as far as it goes to like the functionality of the card, but we are big art buffs, and we definitely believe that like the art of a card is part of what makes it very special. Sometimes, even regardless of what the card does, sometimes the art is just
sick.
I would definitely say, pay attention to the art. Look at the art that you like. You'll see who designed the art down at the bottom, which we'll talk about the bottom of a card soon here in a few minutes. But it's one of the things that makes Magic really special, and I love Magic the Gathering art. I just think it's great. Like I don't know what else to say. I think it's awesome. And the more art that you like, or the more art that you kind of come into contact with, if you decide to start going to different events, a lot of times there are Magic artists there, and you can have your card signed. You can buy prints from them. You can get play mats with their art on it, and it's just really special.
I think it also brings out that collector aspect of Magic. The just appreciation that someone spent time on this piece of artwork and really show appreciation and stuff. Like, sure, a lot of people just look at commons and stuff as throwaway draft chaff and stuff like that, but you gotta hand it to them. Like, they still got really good art.
And there's cards that have like just the sickest, gnarliest, coolest thing that you've ever seen in your entire life. Like, you cannot believe how cool that thing looks. And then there are some that like the art is silly or makes you chuckle. There's some that just have like cute little dudes on it.
Silly little glumbos.
Just silly little friends. And that's something that I think is so cool about this game, is that you can have a card that looks so fucking dope, like the black and white version of Elish Norn that they have that just came out.
Oh, yeah.
Like the one where she's like in tactical pose or whatever.
Yeah.
You can have something like that. And then you can have something like the what's that nut one?
Nut collector.
Nut collector, which is just the goofiest thing that I've ever seen. And then you can have something so absolutely cute. What's that one squirrel that I really like? Do you remember?
Chatterfang?
No. I don't think he makes more squirrels. Maybe it was squirrel. Oh, I liked Squirrel Sovereign a lot. Ravenous Squirrel. I don't know. Apparently I just have a thing for Magic the Gathering squirrels, but there's just a lot. You've got these big beefy dragons that look crazy. You have hot girls like Earthbind. Hello. And then you have like little tree fairies, little cute dude bros, giant demon brosifs.
Ever looked at the card Keldon Warlord?
I don't think so.
Yeah, look at that. Tell me about some beefcakes. That dude's got like 47 abs.
This dude's so big, his like sword is a quarter of the illustration box because he's just so large.
Yeah.
All right, so we've looked at the name, the mana cost, the beautiful illustration. Now we got another box underneath it.
So the little box underneath the illustration is the type line.
And is that telling you like the type of dude it is? Is that telling you what type? What's that telling you?
So it's telling you what type of card it is. So take for instance, I'll use Birds of Paradise. It is a creature. Bird. Creature - bird.
So it is a creature card.
It is a creature card.
And its subtype is bird. Seems pretty self-explanatory. There are some that have a lot of types, like Atraxa is a Phyrexian angel. She's a creature. Well, oftentimes she's a legendary creature.
She's a legendary creature.
Phyrexian angel horror. Yeah. So we're gonna cover every card type and what they are and what they do here in just a minute, but let's just give them a rundown so they're prepped for the next few minutes.
Just a swift little run through of some off the top of the head.
Absolutely.
Enchantment.
Artifact.
Instant.
Creature, but I cheated because we already said that.
Sorcery.
Planeswalkers. Lands.
Ah, yeah, that one.
Tribals. This is a new one. Battles.
Battle is new.
So that's what you're going to find in the type line describing the type of spell that you're casting. Another thing that you'll find in the type line area, for the most part, is that where they are? I don't know.
Yeah, it's on the type line. You'll find the expansion in which the card came from. I would say 9 times out of 10. There are some sets that don't have a set symbol. I'm pretty sure every set that doesn't have a set symbol is Alpha, Beta, Unlimited, Revised, 4th, and 5th edition. I'm pretty sure that's it.
But everything else, you're going to see a expansion symbol in that area.
You might find yourself looking at the expansion symbol and going, why is this a different color? So your common cards, the expansion symbol is going to be black. Your uncommon cards, your expansion symbol is going to be silver. Your rare cards, the expansion symbol is going to be gold. And mythic cards, the expansion symbol is going to be copper.
And that's the rarity of the card, right?
Right. So you have common, uncommon, rare, and mythic.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're good or bad. It just means that you are more likely to get a common than you are to get a mythic.
Right.
So, under our type line, under our expansion symbol, we've got another box, and it's got a lot of words in it. And on some cards, frankly, too many words.
I would say one of those cards where it has too many words is definitely Goblin Wardrooms from Fallen Empires.
Just so many words.
There's a lot of words on there to just tell you that your creatures have menace now.
So, that's the text box, and it's telling you a lot of different things. It's going to tell you about abilities that your creature might have, which we plan on having an entire episode dedicated to abilities, and keywords, and reminder text. You'll also see text in italics that is just flavor text. It's just there that adds to the lore, adds to the story, but does not have any impact on the gameplay itself.
And sometimes you'll find words in parentheses and in italics, and that is reminding you what the ability of your card does.
Oh, so the reminder text?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Reminder text.
This is where that old adage that I've heard too many times in my very, very short Magic career of reading the card explains the card.
Reading the card, in fact, does explain the card.
Which is only, I think, 80% true.
That is fair. Because
I can read the card, but that doesn't mean that I know what the fuck's going on.
But reading the card explains the card, honey.
No, it doesn't. So, text box is going to be abilities, flavor text, reminder text, things that tell you more about what this spell does, is capable of.
All that fun stuff.
Yeah, and we plan on having a whole episode about abilities, keywords.
All that fun stuff.
Yeah. Just a text box deep dive. Me deep dive into that box.
Bento.
Now, underneath the text box, on creature cards, they've got another little box that isn't on other types of cards.
That is the power and toughness.
Alright, so let me see if I can explain this.
Okay.
So the power is how much damage I do when I hit you.
Yes.
And the toughness is how much damage the creature can take before it dies.
Yes.
Okay.
Power is how much damage you can deal to an opponent, an opponent's creature, a planeswalker, or a battle.
And then its toughness is how much damage has to be done to it to destroy it.
Yep.
Now, there's a lot of different things that power and toughness can be different. Power and toughness can change. Power and toughness can be 1 plus the number of creatures you control.
Power and toughness can be changed, where you deal damage with your toughness rather than your power.
There's a lot of different
nuances.
Yeah, just like little change 'em ups here and there. I feel like we will go more in depth with that when we have our episode about combat specifically. But that's just your general, the number to the left of the slash
is your power.
The number to the left of the slash is how much stabby. The number to the right of the slash is how much armor.
Stabby blocky.
Yeah. Punchy, take ouchie.
Yep.
No touchy.
So then on your magic cards, you'll find down at the bottom, there's a little, there's some more words kind of thing, and that's going to tell you who did the illustration of the art. It will also tell you, it is also another spot to find out the rarity of your card. It will tell you what that card is out of however many cards were in the set. It has the copyright code that kind of fun stuff.
Also down there by the collector number of X card out of X in the set, there's also usually a 3-letter code that will tell you what set it's from, because I'm very bad at knowing it from the picture, so I just find the code and then Google it like a champion. But that is something that's very specific to like how cards are printed today and was not always the case. So don't be like me and rely on that section down at the bottom to just have a C or an R to tell you what rarity the card is or what set it's from, and remember that there are cards that might not. So now that we've broken down the anatomy of cards for you, let's deep dive into the different types of cards.
So your typical spell in Magic the Gathering, I would say, would be considered a permanent. Not even spell. So like your lands are permanent, your creatures are permanent, your enchantments are permanent, your artifacts are permanent.
What makes a permanent a permanent?
I believe it is a permanent because it permanently sticks around, whereas an instant or sorcery just goes into the graveyard after being cast.
So a permanent is just a card on your battlefield. It could be a lot of different things, but it's a permanent.
So first off, we're going to talk about lands. You know, those things that you need to cast your spells.
Yeah, just a throwback to last week. Lands are important. They make you mana. You need mana to cast your spells.
Absolutely.
Now, you can play one land during your turn, unless there is something else that you have that states otherwise. But you can play one.
You get one.
Can you play a land on someone else's turn?
You cannot.
Does playing a land count as casting a spell?
It does not. Lands are not spells. Lands are also colorless.
So they themselves are colorless, but they tap for color?
Yes.
Is a card that tells you that you can put land onto the battlefield the same as playing a land for your turn?
No. Put and play are two different.
That's where that reading the card explains the card thing comes in. The words in Magic the Gathering are very important, because play and put are very different. The insertion of the word may can completely change your entire battle plan. Do basic lands follow any of the card number rules?
No. You can have as many basic lands as you want in your deck.
How do you know that a land is basic?
You can tell a land is basic by the type line box.
Are there some lands that are non-basic?
Absolutely.
Do those fall under the you can only have so many depending on the format rule?
Yes.
All right. Now moving on to our little friends, creature cards. So one very important thing about creature cards is that they all have creature types. Some of them even have subtypes. So it will tell you that it's a creature, and it will tell you that it is a
Lurgoyf.
What?
Lurgoyf.
What is that?
It's a Lurgoyf from Ice Age. Lurgoyf. Tarmogoyf. Necrogoyf, I think is the other Lurgoyf.
Okay.
Yeah. Or bird. Or goblin.
Merfolk.
Vampire.
And then that's where those subtypes come in, because there might be
Zombie merfolk.
vampire rogues,
Goblin warrior.
human knight,
Artificer rogue. Raccoon gangster.
that's from New Capenna, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure its creature type is raccoon gangster. Or something silly like that.
Cabaretti Initiate is a raccoon citizen.
Raccoon citizen. He's definitely a little gangster though.
Chatterfang is a squirrel warrior.
Just stuff like that.
So why are these things important? Why does it matter if it's just a goblin or a goblin warrior? Who cares?
Well, it just depends. You know, you may have a card that says your warriors get +1 attack and +0 defense. So if you have just a creature that is goblin, he's not going to get the +1 attack, right? But you have a goblin warrior, because he has that warrior type, he will get that +1 attack.
So if you have something that gives a buff or a positive, let's say, to a certain creature type, that applies even if they have 4 subtypes of their creature.
Yeah, as long as one of those types is on there, then you're good. Cards like Goblin Matron, it goes and searches a goblin card from your library and puts it into your hand. So those goblin cards could be Goblin Zombie, Goblin Rogue, just regular Goblin. It also can get the tribal Goblin spell, Tarfire, because it is tribal Goblin.
So as long as it says that, it's fine. So like Yawgmoth Thran Physician that creature has protection from humans. So it doesn't have to say just human. It could say human warrior, human knight,
human vampire. I don't know. I'm just saying.
But it would still count even though it has more than one subtype.
Right.
Okay. So then one that I think is important to bring up when we talk about like creature types and subtypes is that there are some creatures that are also artifacts. They're artifact creatures, like the little bubbies, little murs.
Yes, mirrors.
And little babies.
Bottle gnomes. Frogmite.
Thopters.
Yes, Thopter babies. Blight Steel Colossus. Dark Steel Colossus.
There are some creatures that will say that they are creatures, but they are also artifact creatures. So they'll say creature - artifact creature. Now, the reason why this is important, and I'm telling you this as a friend, I'm telling you as a homie that's been there. If someone destroys all artifacts, it includes your artifact creature.
Yes.
There are lots of cards that give special abilities to artifacts or let you do things with artifacts, so it's just helpful to know that artifact creatures are considered an artifact and they're considered a creature. And they might even have additional subtypes, because some will say artifact creature - mer.
Right.
So it's an artifact, it's a creature, its subtype is mer. So there are some creatures that are legendary. And this is something that's gonna come into play when we start talking more about formats. But there's something that you need to know about legendary creatures, legendary anythings. If it says legendary, there's a rule.
The legend rule.
Please enlighten us. What is the legend rule?
So, say we've used her a lot this video, but say I have a Thalia Guardian of Thraben on the battlefield, and I cast a new Thalia Guardian of Thraben. When the new Thalia Guardian of Thraben enters the battlefield, the legend rule comes into effect. I have to choose to either sacrifice the old one that I have in play, or sacrifice the new one that I just cast, because there can only be one on the battlefield under your control.
Unless there's a card that tells you otherwise.
Like Mirror Gallery says the legend rule doesn't apply to you.
So that's the long and short of it. If something says legendary, you can only have one. And if you try to put out another one, you got to get rid of the first one or the second one. You only have one. That's it.
Everybody gets one.
Unless otherwise specified. In the Magic the Gathering universe, There are some very important friends that aren't creatures. They're their own kind of thing.
Are you talking about perhaps planeswalkers?
I am, in fact, talking about planeswalkers.
First introduced in Lorwyn?
Sure. Planeswalkers have their own very special lore, which we are not going to get into because we are not a lore podcast. I don't know anything about it. So, what makes planeswalkers different?
So, when looking at a planeswalker, you can tell that they're a lot different from a creature. Instead of having a power and toughness, they have loyalty. Instead of your usual text box, they have their loyalty abilities, which are either a plus. It's usually a plus, a minus, and a minus. All of these abilities in their own right are very strong. And the more loyalty your planeswalker gets, the longer it can stay around, kind of thing. Planeswalkers can be affected by direct damage, like a lightning bolt. Things of that nature. They can be attacked by creatures. They can be hit by spells like Abrupt Decay or Hero's Downfall.
So, if someone casts a spell that says destroy all creatures, does that counter a planeswalker?
It does not, because the planeswalker is not a creature, it is a planeswalker.
If someone casts a spell that gives all creatures -4/-4, does that impact your planeswalker?
No, because once again, it is not a creature, it is a planeswalker. So, when I learned Magic, I was told to pretend the planeswalker is kind of like another player. He's on your side of the field, he's working for you, but he can also be dealt direct damage and attacked.
Can planeswalkers attack?
Yes, but in rare instances. There are cards like Gideon, ally of Zendikar. Like most of the Gideon planeswalkers, he can turn himself into a creature and he can attack. There's also the sword that came out in New Capenna that turns your planeswalkers into creatures, and you can still activate their loyalty and stuff, but you can punch people with them.
Giada's Luxor gift or something like that?
Something. It's gonna be on the screen.
So planeswalkers themselves cannot inherently attack, but there are some planeswalkers that have an ability that allows you to turn them into a creature and they can attack.
Right.
But like planeswalkers themselves just can't.
Right.
So plussing and minusing the planeswalker loyalty counters, that's called activating their loyalty.
Right.
So adding or removing those numbers, those loyalty counters, how many times a turn can you do that?
You can activate that one time a turn, unless you have a card that states otherwise.
Can you activate loyalty abilities on someone else's turn?
And you cannot activate planeswalkers on your opponent's turns.
Are all planeswalkers legendary?
Yes.
We talked about the legendary rule when it came to creatures, but the legendary rule also applies with planeswalkers. Some planeswalkers say legendary, and some of them don't. Back when the set Ixalan came out, there was a rule change, determination, whatever, that says all planeswalkers, past, present, and future, are considered legendary. I know that some planeswalkers have an ability, their minus ability, that says remove this many counters and you get an emblem that states something. What does that mean?
So a lot of planeswalkers, it's called their ultimate ability, because it's usually a game-ending like effect. Emblems cannot be interacted with positively or negatively. They're just there forever. The emblem stays around for the rest of the duration of the game.
So if you get the emblem, you can't get rid of it for the rest of the game.
Right.
So let's say that the ultimate ability for a Planeswalker is 7. If they only have 7 counters on it and you take all 7 off, does it die?
It dies.
So if you wanted to alt out, as the kids say, your Planeswalker, and the alt out was 7, but they had 8 counters on it,
your Planeswalker would still be alive at 1 loyalty.
One type of permanent that exists are artifacts.
I would say that artifacts are like a utility kind of thing. They're mana rocks, they're creatures.
Oh, equipment?
They're equipment.
Like there's like swords and shit, yeah.
Axes.
Gilded
swords.
Gilded pinions.
A lot of hate cards are artifacts, like your pithing needles and your
Skull clamp.
Well, no, that's an equipment.
But it's an artifact.
Yeah, I was more talking about like pithing needle, Graft Digger's Cage, the jailer creature, Soulless Jailer, like those kind of guys, you know.
So they're kind of like tools, utilities. Yeah. Sometimes they have things that you can use them for, like mana or other abilities, or sometimes they just sit as a permanent on your battlefield, either giving you something or allowing your opponents to not be able to do something.
Or they're sitting on your battlefield waiting for you to use it at the correct time, kind of thing, like a Tormod's Crypt. Or say you need an extra mana and you got a Lotus Petal hanging around.
Artifacts are also equipment, so they are, as it would sound, pieces of equipment that you can pay mana to equip to creatures, and it gives them perks, bonuses. Sometimes it makes it stronger, sometimes it makes it tougher, sometimes it lets it fly.
Gives it life link, which is when you attack, you gain life when it deals combat damage. You just get benefits. Another type of card that you may encounter is an enchantment.
Now, enchantments are cool because they're permanents that usually give you some sort of perk or buff, and it stays around and it just sits there. It's kind of like its own emblem, sorta.
Yeah, it's kind of, I guess that's a way to put it. They sit there and they usually give you like an upside to playing them. Or there's enchantment curses where you can play them on your opponents and it gives them negative effects.
Or enchantment auras that you can put on a creature that like sometimes gives them something negative, sometimes it gives them something positive.
Yeah, they're just another way to impact the game.
Some enchantments let you play more lands. Some enchantments make your creatures bigger.
Some enchantments double the amount of tokens you put on the battlefield, or double the amount of 1/1 counters you put on your creatures.
Some enchantments let you make a treasure every time someone draws a card unless they pay to stop you.
Some enchantments ask you to pay one when your opponent successfully casts a spell.
Are you going to pay the 1?
Are you going to pay the 4?
So they are permanents that, again, give you extra buffs. Or they are things that can negatively impact an opponent, like a curse, an aura curse. Or
Rhystic Study.
Well, that's not an aura curse.
It's not, but it negatively impacts your opponent.
Oh, yeah, that's fair.
Mystic Remora also negatively impacts your opponent.
And then there are the enchantment auras that go on creatures that sometimes give them some positives, sometimes gives them some negatives.
Or it could give them positives and then later on just gives them a negative. like Unstable Mutation.
There are some enchantments that kind of go in stages. So instead of casting it and it being one thing, it kind of lets you do a couple of different things. Do you know which ones I'm talking about?
The Sagas.
So the cool thing about Sagas is that once per turn, they're going to tick up on their number of different steps, and they let you do a lot of different things. There are some that have you play extra lands or go and find extra lands. There's some that deal damage. There's a lot of different ones. There are some that when they are done and they've moved through all their steps, it lets you flip it over and it turns into something else, like a creature or an enchantment, like a permanent enchantment.
Or land.
There's a whole bunch of different ones, and they're very cool. There's also ones, too, that say read ahead. So, like, normally you can only do the first step when you cast it, and then the next turn you can do the second step, and so on. But there are some that say read ahead, which as soon as you cast it, you can go up the numbers as many times as you want.
Well, you can go up the number however far you want.
Yeah, that. You could go up the number however far you wanted to on that very first turn. Our next thing that we're going to talk about is not a permanent.
It is not a permanent?
It's not. It's like a one-time, very brief, real quick and dirty kind of thing. These ones can be played at any time, and even on your opponent's turns.
Oh, you're talking about instants.
Yeah. An instant is not a permanent. I'm telling you this because there are some cards that tell you that you can do stuff with permanents, like get them out of your graveyard or out of your library or basically anything. They're not permanents. Don't try it.
Don't try it, Anakin.
You can play instants at any point during your turn or your opponent's turns unless there are cards that tell you that you can't.
Whereas the counterpart, sorcery, you can only cast on your turn.
So would you say that a sorcery is better or an instance better?
It all just kind of depends. I would say that yes, technically your instants are better because you can strategically choose better when to cast them, but you know, cards like Ponder that let you look at the top 3 cards of your library and draw a card and stuff, like those are sorceries and they're still really good kind of thing, you know?
I would say too that it does depend on what the instant or the sorcery is. There's some instants it doesn't matter that you can play them strategically on your opponent's turns because they don't really do anything. There's some sorceries that it's great that you can play it, so it just kind of depends. Sorceries, like instants, are not permanents.
You cast it, it resolves, it goes to the graveyard.
Talking about instant and talking about sorcery brings up something that we've basically said, but just want to kind of put into the terms of instant speed and sorcery speed. And it can be broken down as simple as this. Instants, anytime. Any part of a turn, on your friends' turns, whenever you want to. Sorceries, only on your turn, not when you're fighting people. So that's the difference between instant and sorcery speed. There are some abilities that different things might have that tells you activate only as a sorcery, which basically just means you can only do it on your turn and not when you're fighting people. So these are just kind of things to keep in the back of your mind as we continue to learn and grow together, because these are the things that could make or break how you choose to play your deck or what kind of cards that you want. Because when you can play it and how often you can do it does make a big impact.
Some cards that you might see are called tribal cards. They haven't been made for quite some time. Maybe they might bring them back someday. So take for instance Goblin Matron. Goblin Matron can go find a goblin card from your library. Tarfire is a tribal instant goblin card. So because it is tribal instant dash goblin, it is technically a goblin card, so Goblin Matron can go find it. Whereas a card like Goblin Grenade is just an instant.
But it has goblin in the main name.
Where it has goblin in the name, but not goblin in the type line, so your Goblin Matron cannot go get Goblin Grenade, kind of thing.
So basically, all that tribal means is that it is it's an instant or sorcery that also has a subtype that kind of lumps in with everything else.
Right. So I would say it's like if you have certain cards that search your library for, say, Eldrazi, Rogue, Goblin, those cards could go get these tribal cards.
And we just like to say that tribal is like a frame of reference that we know is best to kind of move away from. So you might see it on the card, but when we reference it, we try to say things like goblin focused or goblin matters, just to make sure that we're being inclusive and respectful of all of our friends, all the people that play Magic, and even all the people that want to play Magic. We obviously can't change the words that are on a card that we didn't make, but we can choose how we talk about it.
So the next thing on the list, the topics, are battles. The new guys that came out in March of the Machines.
So the way that I'm kind of understanding it is it's a card and it has its own defense, right? It doesn't have power toughness like a creature, but it doesn't have loyalty like a planeswalker, but they kind of work in the same way. It just has a defense number.
Right, and you can attack it and deal direct damage to it, and then you will get the other side of said battle.
So you'll cast the battle, you'll give it to an opponent to protect, you and others can attack it, and then once the defense has been lowered all the way to 0, the card can be flipped over, and it now has a different...
It'll transform into an enchantment, a creature, an equipment, something extravagant.
Again, this is a new card type that was just introduced in March of the Machines, which is the chunk of sets that just came out in, April?
Yeah.
So it's a relatively new concept. That's essentially the extent that we know about them. I couldn't tell you their rate of play. I couldn't tell you if they're good. I couldn't tell you if they're bad. I think we can safely say that it is too soon to tell.
I think they're neat. You will also encounter a lot of Magic cards that create tokens of different varieties. Say they create creature tokens, artifacts, treasures, clues,
Artifact creatures,
birds,
fairy rogues,
blood,
spirits, fish, squirrel,
pilots, thralls,
zombies.
goblins, vampires, just the whole 9 yards.
What's really cool about tokens is that they aren't permanents that you cast from your hand. They're permanents that you acquire from casting other cards. So whether it's an instant or a sorcery that lets you make tokens, or abilities of a card that you currently have on your battlefield that lets you make tokens, they're not coming from your hand, and there's lots of different kinds.
So while there may be a lot of tokens out there that you may encounter in your day-to-day games of Magic the Gathering, we've come up with a list of our 5 that we think that you would come across the most.
4 of them are artifacts, and 1 of them's a creature.
The first on the list, in our opinion, would definitely be treasures.
Treasures are popular. They come up a lot in a lot of different formats. I think a lot of people would say that they are a valuable token. It is, because they are a valuable token, I think that they are played more than something that just makes a 1/1 human. Treasures are a colorless artifact token that you can tap and sacrifice to add 1 mana of any color. Treasures are a temporary mana source, so when you want to use them, it's a one shot. It's a one and done. It's not like your artifacts and your lands that stay on the battlefield for you to continually reuse. You do have to get rid of them after you use them.
Number 2 would be Clue. Is another colorless artifact token. You pay 2 generic mana into it, and you sacrifice it, and you get to draw a card.
So the next one on the list is a blood token. These are really similar to Clue tokens in that they let you draw a card, but they have kind of a different balance to them. So blood tokens, you're only going to have to pay 1 mana. You will tap the blood token, you will sacrifice it, and you will discard a card and draw a card. So the balance that they have with clues is they do cost 1 mana less to be able to use to be able to draw that card, but that, again, that kind of balance is that you have to discard a card also.
Which, discarding the card doesn't have to be a negative kind of thing. You could discard a card like Lingering Souls that has a flashback cost, something you can get smart with it kind of thing. So the 4th item on our list is a food token. Foods are pay 2 mana, tap, sacrifice, you gain 3 life.
We felt like the food was especially relevant with the Lord of the Rings set coming out. I hear that's something that those boys...
They sure do love their second breakfast.
The last most common token that you would see is very specific. It's a creature, and it's also more specific to one format of the game. But it's an animal you'd find at the zoo.
Rhinoceros. It was a 4/4 rhinoceros.
It comes up a lot in Modern, I hear.
It does, in rhinos. Thanks for watching today's episode. If you would like to support us, you can do so at these places, wherever the links are, probably in the description and not floating around our faces. You could check us out at Patreon at the Grim Tutors.
You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Grim Tutors MTG. All of the links are in the description below.
Click them. Ta-ta for now.
We'll see you next time.
Doot 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 doot.
Doot do.
Let me yawn real quick. Alright.
Bingle bangle bongle. I don't know.
So when
That Google image search was great.
Google image search definitely had a whole bunch of raccoons with fedoras. Yeah, get in there, son. Show the people your face. Show them that little cute face. Yeah, show them that cute face. Man.
What did he get into?
It's the catnip.
Oh, he rolled in it.
Yeah, he always rolls it. Scooch over just a little bit, but hit that lay down button. Yeah, that's nice. No kicky feet.